Hi everybody, today I wanted to bring you a little bit of a different video. I wanted to talk about Gwent and the state of it, the future, some things I would like to see from the game, what I think Gwent needs to kind of flourish. I'm going to give my opinion, my critique, as I have done in the past, because I feel like it might be an important time to do that, and yeah, I would like to, of course, voice my thoughts and some slight concerns, I guess you could call them, but more just some positive, I guess, feedback about the direction of the game. And I also want to talk about just the state of the game right now, the strength of the new leaders that's announced, and some of the new information we have regarding the March expansion. So quite a lot to talk about here, and hopefully we'll get through all of it. So, firstly, well, what is going on with the new leaders? Are they good? Are they cool? How strong are they? All that stuff. I've really enjoyed the new leaders. I think, especially Gurnikora. I really love her design. She feels impactful throughout the whole game. Very awesome leader, I think. And I don't think she's too strong that it's oppressive. The spear change, of course, the hotfix will help people who have PTSD from artifacts, I suppose. But yeah, I really like her design. Arnulf is very fun to play. Eldain as well is cool, but not very viable. Meve a little bit more boring with her ability, but quite powerful. And Ardal, pretty interesting and nice to have the deck building mechanic back in the game that we used to have with Viper Witches and whatnot. So in terms of strength, I would say relative to the faction's other leaders, so comparing them to the other leaders in the faction, I would say Meve is probably the strongest new leader. I think she's very possibly the best Northern Realms leader now. I think Ardal is then the next best. I think he's also vying for a top spot. And then probably Gurnikora. I think she's also very good, although you can still very easily be playing Woodland or Eridan depending on what you want to go for. And then I think Arnulf and Eldain finally are the weaker leaders, I suppose. Arnulf, I've seen some decks trying to make him work, but I don't think he's as good as the other Skellige leaders right now. And Eldain, I don't really think is playable at all, to be quite honest. But the other three are very, very good in terms of their power level in relation to the other leaders in the faction. And yeah, I think all the leaders have been designed very well. Eldain, I'm sure, will shine in the future when more traps are added, as will Ardal even more. And Arnulf maybe as well, even with some new Bloodthirst cards or damage synergy cards or whatever, right? So I would say Woodland right now, or Gurnikora, Big Monsters is probably the most popular deck, it seems like, and maybe the strongest as well. So that's kind of the meta roundup, I suppose you could call it, surrounding these new leaders that have been released. It's really cool to see some of them being played, and I've tested with a lot of them, had a lot of fun with them, so that was really cool. So yeah, for those that were wondering, that's my opinions on the new leaders and all that stuff. So what next? Well, we recently found out from the lovely Berger that there will in fact be new leaders coming with the upcoming March expansion, as well as, of course, a plethora of cards. And I assume this will all be focused around the Blood and Wine theme, the expansion that came out for Witcher 3. If you aren't aware of it, I highly recommend playing The Witcher 3, playing Blood and Wine. Very, very exciting, very fun time. Um, but that's probably going to be the theme of the expansion, is my guess anyway, from the revealed cards that we've had. And maybe that'll mean we get like things like Dettlaff, Anna Henrietta as leaders. That would be very, very cool. So that's what's coming for the future of Gwent. Next month in March, probably towards the end of March, we're getting an expansion with new leaders. Now, we're also going to be starting up the tournaments again. There will be a Gwent Open in that March, probably before, I guess, the expansion drops, right? They want to hype it up with a little bit of tournament and some leaks to boost the tournament view account and all that. So I would imagine, yeah, towards the end of March will be the expansion. So that's all really, really exciting. Gwent Open will happen, and then maybe we'll have more tournaments in the future, I suppose, with Challenger World Masters coming up shortly after, probably. So that's all really exciting stuff. Really looking forward to it. And now I want to just take a moment to talk about what I think Gwent really needs. I think the game is in such a good state right now. I think it really, really is great. I'm sure you've picked up on that if you've been watching my streams recently, or my YouTube videos for that matter. Either way, I think, yeah, it's a pretty important time for the game. And if CDPR can nail this next patch, this next expansion, then I really do believe that this game will succeed in a rather large way. Maybe not quite to the extent of Magic or Hearthstone, but I think it will do very well. It's already doing quite well and has regained a fair amount of the popularity that it once had. I think that's fair to say. Either way, what do I think Gwent will need for the future? What do we need to keep it on track? What does CDPR need to really nail down and do properly to make this game really thrive and succeed in the way that it really deserves to? So, firstly, I think the biggest issue for a lot of people, and not even necessarily myself, but I think a lot of returning players, new players, all are experiencing the same problem, and it's to do with just the overall game speed and the animation speed, the game feeling sluggish. I know so many people who've made that criticism of the game. It just feels quite slow. I get bored. Like, I want to do all this. I want to do my actions quickly. I don't know when, like, the turn doesn't auto end for me. It's really weird. I have to always press end turn. Now, I know CDPR are looking into this stuff. They've even said they want to maybe make an automated end turn feature if they can do that. But really, the animation speeds, the pace of the game needs to feel snappy and responsive, and you need to, like, the animations are great and they're cool and they're awesome, but they need to be fast paced. You want that snappiness and responsiveness that old Gwent had. You know, you would just play a card, it would slam really quickly. You could then instantly, your turn would swap to the other opponent. You play a card, swap, play a card, swap, or whatever. So with the new orders and stuff, you obviously would want to be able to queue up order effects, you know, click lots of times, or the animations would have to be really rapid or whatever. I don't know exactly how to do that. I'm not like a technical wizard or whatever when it comes to uh, how the animations and all the sequencing and stuff works in the game and in the client, but I think if CDPR can find a way to really get that kind of responsiveness and fluidity to the gameplay back, it's really going to entice a lot of new players in and also returning players who miss that kind of responsiveness that old Gwent had and the fast-paced nature of it, right? Um, so that's probably the biggest issue I think that's holding the game back, actually. Whether or not people blame other things, I think that is something that is really making people, yeah, not too fond of the gameplay. And obviously that's not a gameplay problem, which is really awesome, right? If it were a gameplay problem that was the biggest issue, I think the game would obviously not have as much of a chance to be super popular in the future. But okay, if they can fix all that, the animation stuff, maybe even the lighting of the board, or like give you an option to maybe make it brighter or whatever, that could also be cool. Okay, so what next? Well, this is sort of a really important thing as well, and it's just to do with the expansion. Obviously, they need to make an expansion which is very compelling, fun to play, and draws people in, and also makes people who already play the game feel good about the game they're playing and the cards they're playing and all that. So, what I'm saying is the expansion really needs to be great. Now, how are they going to make the expansion great? Well, I think the most important things to hit with this expansion are you need to make the archetypes more fleshed out that we already have, and potentially new archetypes be introduced if that's possible. I don't know how many cards they're introducing. They're obviously introducing leaders as well, so potentially there's room there to create new archetypes that we don't even have. But they really need to make archetypes more fleshed out than they are right now and more viable as well, so that each faction has its kind of own identity, unique way to play, and sort of things that it does well, things that it does poorly. That's really important, I think, for making the gameplay itself actually more fun. If you feel like you're playing, this unique deck, this unique faction, you're fighting the battle in a way that your, army does better than the opponent or whatever, and they're trying something a little bit, different to what you're going for, I think that's really, really quite compelling. So that's the first thing, and the other thing is I would love to see some new mechanics in the game. There really have been quite a removal of a lot of mechanics throughout the history of the game. There's been some, introduced, but like things like orders and artifacts, for example, right? But there have also been ones that have been removed, like armor, for example. The Quen mechanic, where you shield one of your units so it doesn't take damage the first time it takes damage. These are mechanics I would love back in the game. I think it would add a bit of complexity and a bit more variety to the sorts of cards you're playing. You're not just playing damage, boosting, etc., which is a complaint I hear quite a lot as well about the game. Now there is stuff like immunity. That's a really cool mechanic that we have right now. Some units are immune. They can't be targeted, right? But they can be scorched or whatever. I think you could even go further. You could add more mechanics like that, or different to that, or these cool things that make cards unique. Yeah, and make the gameplay different. Like, okay, here's an example, right? Maybe you could have a unit or a tag rather that when it's on a unit, it makes that unit have to be targeted by the opponent's damage, or whatever. It can only be targeted before other stuff is targeted. What I'm saying is it's like a taunt, effectively, right? So say, yeah, you play this card and your opponent has to do damage to it before they can do damage to any of your other units. Something like that. Maybe that's a cool mechanic to implement, right? Like forcing targeting on one specific unit, something like that. And I believe there's quite a lot of space. I don't have like an abundance of ideas myself, but obviously Quen mechanic being in the game, you could maybe even make that quite widely a thing. Maybe not. Armor as well. You don't even necessarily have to restrict that to Northern Realms. I think that could be very cool in other factions as well, especially where it's thematically appropriate and to protect engines and whatnot. And anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but the point is, yeah, there's a lot of space that CDPR should be using, I feel, to implement new mechanics and make the gameplay more complex and deep than it already is. That's not something the game is struggling too much from at the moment. There's already a lot of dynamism between the engine removal and playing engines yourself. That's probably the key point of complexity in the game at the moment. And depth to it, saving removal, not saving removal, playing an engine here, mulliganing an engine, whatever it might be. But I think there's room to improve on that. Now, if they're introducing these new mechanics, which I would really hope they would go that route and do some fun stuff with that. I'm sure they have ideas, and I'm sure, I can imagine a lot of crazy stuff you could come up with the blood and wine theme, right? You already have Bloodthirst and Consume and Deathwish and stuff, but surely there's some space there. I do believe CDPR will find a way to explore that. Either way, I think new mechanics in the game, yeah, really important. And if you do those new mechanics, perhaps you have to rebalance some stuff because maybe removal becomes too weak if you have armor in the game, for example. That's maybe going to cause some changes to the gameplay that you don't foresee, and I can appreciate that. But I think then, yeah, if you're doing mechanics like that, you also need to maybe change some of the current cards we have to, raise them up in power level, raise them down in power level, whatever it might be, just so that you're not completely breaking the game and giving a bad impression, especially for the people who already are playing, and you don't want to, of course, have an imbalanced game and everything being crazy and some stuff being really not viable and other things being really OP and whatnot. So that's quite a big thing for them, right? They have to CDPR, Gwent, we need to we need to flesh out archetypes properly, stuff like Trap Scoia'tael, Tactic Nilfgaard, Self-Wounding Skellige, the list goes on. You want to make sure all these kind of archetypes that are cool in theme and idea and concept and whatever, those should be actually viable and fun to play and interesting synergies going on. And of course, I would love new mechanics as well. And if they can implement all of that while not completely breaking the game, then I think this expansion will be so good for the game, so enjoyable for people who play Gwent and for those who might be interested in it. So that is all very important for them to nail. Now, of course, feel free to leave any suggestions for new mechanics that you have. I'm sure everyone can come up with some really, really cool ideas for that stuff, and I'm sure CDPR will as well. And this leads me on to just the final thing that I would like to see in the future, and this is just card reveals. I think the leader spotlights were really good in building hype, and CDPR have done card reveals in the past for Midwinter, I believe. They did reveal cards slowly before that expansion hit, so I would like to see that again. I think it really gives something for content creators to do, like myself, which is of course nice. But more than anything, it just hypes everyone up for the release, gives something for people to talk about and discuss, in streams and on YouTube, whatever. Really gets people invested and interested in the expansion, which is of course the idea of bringing out an expansion, right? You want people to care about it. So yeah, I would love to see some card reveals, maybe even give content creators, not necessarily myself, cards to reveal. That's also a nice thing to do. Both helps, the people who are creating content for your game and also make sure that newer players or people who don't normally potentially, watch external stuff to the game itself, helps them, get into some of the really juicy content, some of the good and helpful gameplay that they might find, or discussions or whatever that they might find on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, wherever it might be. So yeah, there's a list of things that I think Gwent needs to hit and really nail, and if they can do all that, then I really do believe the game will succeed in a big way. I'm already really happy with where Gwent is, and I don't foresee this being a second Midwinter. I really hope it won't be. I think there's only so much you can do to damage the game at this point. I think we're in a pretty good spot, but don't want to jinx it. With that being said, yeah, what do I want? Well, improved animations and game speed would be really, really nice to see, of course. There's also a few other things like spectator client and tournament client that would be lovely to have, but I don't anticipate them being in the game for a while, if ever. Would definitely love to see that, but not sure that'll happen. But the top things are, of course, game speed, animations, all that. Fleshing out the archetypes that we already have, synergies between cards that are introduced, and new mechanics implemented, or old mechanics returning. That are interesting and fun, and make sure you don't break the game when you do all that stuff, right? That's also important. Maybe not as important as introducing fun stuff, but it is still important nevertheless. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on Gwent right now, Gwent in the future, and hypothetical Gwent in my mind, what I would like to see and all that. So let me know if you agree, disagree, you know, whatever. All the usual comments, I will read them as I always do. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.